5-year-old Guinevere stood in the shadow of the Thing stones, ancient monuments that had witnessed 3 centuries of judgment, her small hand clutched in her mother Isolde's trembling grip. The morning mist clung to the clearing like funeral shrouds, and beneath her bare feet, the grass was littered with things that made her stomach twist, small bones, half buried and bleached white by seasons of rain and sun, scattered like broken promises across the sacred ground. "Mama, please," Guinevere whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind moving through the standing stones. "I can feel my wolf. She's just sleeping. She'll wake up. I promise she'll wake up." Isolde's face crumpled, tears streaming down, cheeks marked with the blue woad patterns of their clan. Behind them, Jarl Uhtred stood with his warriors, a wall of leather and iron and wolf pelt cloaks, each pelt a symbol of successful transformation, of strength proven. Guinevere had no pelt. She had nothing but the rough wool shift her mother had dressed her in that morning, and the desperate hope that somehow this wasn't really happening. "The blood law is absolute." Uhtred's voice cut through the clearing, cold as winter stone. "Any pup who fails to shift by their 5th year carries weakness in their blood. Weakness threatens the pack, threatens our strength, threatens our survival in a world that shows no mercy to the defective. She's 5 years old." Isolde's voice broke on a sob. "She's a child, Uhtred. My child. Give her more time. Another season. Another—" "The blood moon has passed," Uhtred interrupted, unmoved. "She had her chance. The Thing stones demand their due. This is the old way, Isolde. This is how we've remained strong for generations. You know the law. You swore the same oaths we all did." He paused, letting the weight of tradition settle over them like iron chains. "Leave her here. If she's truly strong, if her wolf truly sleeps as you claim, perhaps she'll survive. Perhaps the All-Father will show mercy. But Bebbanburg cannot waste resources on those who cannot contribute." Guinevere looked around the clearing and finally understood what the small bones meant. Other children. Other defectives. Other mothers who'd stood exactly where Isolde stood now, choosing between love and survival. She counted 7 skulls visible in the grass, and gods knew how many more lay hidden beneath the earth, feeding the roots of plants that grew too green in this cursed place. "You're murdering her," Isolde said, her voice hollow now, defeated. "Don't dress it up in tradition and law. You're leaving my daughter to die." "I'm protecting the pack," Uhtred corrected. "As Jarl, that's my sacred duty. Now choose, Isolde. Leave the defective pup and return to your family, or stay with her and watch your other children starve when I strip your family of clan protection. Your son and daughter need their mother. Don't orphan functional children for one broken wolf." The math was brutal and simple. 1 child or 3. 1 daughter or her entire family's survival. Guinevere saw the moment her mother's resistance shattered, saw the terrible calculation happen behind Isolde's eyes. "I'm sorry," Isolde whispered, kneeling to hold Guinevere one last time. "I'm so sorry, my little wolf. I tried. I hid your late shift as long as I could. Told the clan you were just slow. But Uhtred found out, and I can't. I can't protect you from this. I don't have the power. Why can't I come home with you?" Guinevere asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "I'm not defective. My wolf is here, Mama. I can feel her. She's just not ready yet." "I know, baby. I believe you." Isolde pressed something small into Guinevere's hand, a carved wooden wolf, the toy her father had made before he died in last winter's raids. "But believing you doesn't change the law, and I can't, gods forgive me. I can't watch you die. At least this way, I won't see it happen." She kissed Guinevere's forehead, her tears falling like rain, then turned and walked away. "Didn't run," though Guinevere could see how badly she wanted to. Just walked steadily back toward the warriors, toward Uhtred, toward the life that would continue without her youngest daughter in it. Guinevere watched her mother disappear into the forest trail, watched the warriors follow, watched until even the sound of their footsteps faded to nothing. Then she was alone in the thing-stone circle, 5 years old, unable to shift, with no survival skills and no shelter. Just a little girl left in the Northumbrian wilderness to die, because she couldn't transform on command. She looked at the small skulls scattered in the grass, at the bones of children who'd been abandoned before her, children who hadn't survived. She was going to die here. She knew that. 5-year-olds didn't survive alone in the forest. The clan knew that. That's why abandonment was murder. It just let nature do the killing so the pack could pretend their hands were clean. "I'm not defective," Guinevere said to the empty clearing, to the bones of abandoned pups, to the towering thing-stones that had witnessed generations of this horror. "My wolf is here. She's waiting. And when she wakes up, when I survive this, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to burn your bloodlaw to ash." It was a vow carved into her heart with the desperate fury only a betrayed child could summon. Guinevere didn't know if she'd live long enough to keep that promise, but she was going to try. 3 nights later, she was dying. No food for 3 days. No water except what she could lap from muddy streams with hands that shook from cold and weakness. No warmth except huddling beneath bushes that provided no real shelter. No protection from predators except hiding and praying they wouldn't smell her. She was so cold, so hungry, so tired of being afraid. On the 3rd night, as Guinevere lay curled beneath a thorn bush, shivering so hard her teeth rattled, something massive approached through the darkness. She smelled it first: wild wolf, the real kind, not werewolf. A predator that might see a small, helpless child as easy prey. Guinevere tried to run. Couldn't. Too weak, too cold, too broken by abandonment and starvation. The wolf emerged from shadows made solid. Massive male with silver-grey fur and amber eyes that held an intelligence that seemed almost human. He approached slowly, cautiously, his great head lowered as he scented the air around her small, dying form. Guinevere waited for teeth, waited for the end. Instead, the wolf Fenrir, though she wouldn't learn his name until much later, lay down beside her small body, pressed his massive warmth against her shivering form, shared his heat with a child his kind should have seen as prey. Guinevere felt tears stream down her face, not from fear this time, but from gratitude so profound it hurt worse than hunger. "Thank you," she whispered to the wild wolf, her voice barely a breath. "Thank you for not leaving me too." Fenrir licked her face gently, a gesture of acceptance, and stayed with her through that long, dark night. And when morning came, he led her deeper into the forest, not to death, but to his pack. 15 wild wolves who could have killed her, could have seen a human child as threat or meal. Instead, they adopted her. The werewolves of Bebbanburg had abandoned Guinevere to die. But the wild wolves, who owed her nothing, chose to let her live. Her survival, and everything that would come after, began in that moment of unexpected mercy. Guinevere was 4 years old when she first understood that something was wrong with her. The autumn equinox had arrived, the traditional time when pups born in her year group attempted their first transformations under the watchful eyes of clan elders. One by one, her age mates had shifted, some smoothly, some with the awkward fumbling of new magic, but all successfully. Even little Osric, who could barely string 3 words together, had managed a decent wolf form. Guinevere had stood in the practice circle, closed her eyes, reached for the wolf she swore she could feel sleeping inside her chest, and found nothing. No transformation, no surge of magic. Just a 4-year-old girl standing naked in the cold, while the elders exchanged meaningful glances that made her stomach hurt. Perhaps she's a late bloomer, her mother Isolde had said with forced brightness, wrapping Guinevere in furs and hurrying her away from the whispers that followed like smoke. Some wolves need more time. That's all. Just more time. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder over the following months, shifting from uncertain speculation to confident diagnosis. Weakness in the bloodline, the elders murmured over their mead. Genetic defect, the warriors agreed during training sessions. Burden on resources, the mothers said while nursing their own successfully shifted pups. Guinevere learned to recognize the look people gave her, a mixture of pity and disgust, the way you might regard a lame horse that would need to be put down eventually. Her siblings, Aelric and Eadlin, both early shifters who'd transformed at 3, began receiving extra attention, extra food, extra everything, while Guinevere was increasingly forgotten at the edges of family meals. Her 5th birthday approached like an executioner's axe, and everyone knew what it meant. The blood moon deadline. The law was ancient, carved into the thing stones themselves, enforced without exception for as long as anyone could remember. Any pup who failed to shift by their 5th year would be taken to the grove and left. No appeals, no mercy, just the cold mathematics of survival in a world that rewarded only strength. 3 days before her birthday, Jarl Uhtred summoned the entire clan to the Great Hall. Guinevere sat pressed against her mother's side, small and silent, while the Jarl stood before the central fire and explained to everyone what they already knew what would happen to her. The blood law exists because it must, Uhtred began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. He was a massive man, scarred from decades of warfare, his wolf pelt cloak made from his own first shift, the mark of a warrior who'd proven his strength early. Odin Allfather values warriors above all else, those who can fight, who can hunt, who can defend our territory and honor. Late shifters dilute our strength, they burden our limited resources. They threaten clan survival through genetic weakness that, if allowed to breed, would doom future generations. Guinevere felt every eye in the hall slide toward her, felt the weight of their judgment like stones piled on her chest. Some of you have asked why we cannot simply wait, Uhtred continued, his gaze moving deliberately to Isolde. Why not give these pups another year, another season, another chance? I'll tell you why. Because mercy to the weak is cruelty to the strong. Every mouthful of food given to a pup who cannot hunt is stolen from a warrior who can defend us. Every moment of protection wasted on those who cannot fight is time stolen from training those who will. Every defective bloodline we allow to persist weakens the genetic strength that has kept Bebbanburg dominant for 10 generations. He gestured toward the thing stones visible through the hall's open doors, ancient monuments that predated even the oldest clan memories. The thing stones serve the All-Father's will. They enforce natural selection. The strong survive. The weak are returned to the earth. This is not cruelty. It is survival. This is not murder. It is resource management. This is not choice. It is sacred duty. Isolde stood abruptly, still holding Guinevere against her side. She's 4 years old, Uhtred. She's a child. Some wolves are simply late developers. My grandmother didn't shift until she was 6, and she became one of our finest. Your grandmother, Uhtred interrupted coldly, lived in a time when we could afford such luxuries, when our territory was secure, our resources abundant, our enemies weak. Those days are gone. Now we face Saxon expansion from the south, rival clans from the north, and winters that grow harsher each year. We cannot afford to feed mouths that cannot contribute. We cannot afford to protect bodies that cannot fight. We cannot afford your daughter. The hall fell silent, except for the crackling fire. Guinevere could hear her own heartbeat, loud as drums in her ears. "I'm begging you," Isolde said, her voice breaking. "Give her until the spring, until the summer. Just a few more months. She's my daughter." "And Aelric and Edlin are also your children," Ohtred replied, his tone gentling slightly but remaining inexorable. "Children who shifted properly. Children who will grow into valuable clan members. Children who need their mother." He paused, letting the implication settle. "If you refuse to follow blood law, if you try to harbor a defective pup in defiance of sacred tradition, I will have no choice but to exile your entire family, strip you of clan protection, turn you out into the wilderness with no resources, no support, no allies. Your functional children will starve because you chose to save one broken wolf. Is that what you want, Isolde? To orphan two strong pups for one weak one?" Guinevere felt her mother's body go rigid, felt the trembling that started in Isolde's core and radiated outward. This was the choice, then. Naked and brutal. One daughter or three children. Love or survival. Heart or pragmatism. "When?" Isolde whispered. 3 days, Uhtred said. "On her 5th birthday, as blood law requires. You will take her to the Thing Stones at dawn. You will leave her there. You will return alone. If she survives, if her wolf finally manifests under the pressure of mortal danger, perhaps she'll find her way back to us. If not..." He shrugged. "Then the All-Father has made his judgment clear." That night, Guinevere lay awake in the sleeping alcove she shared with her siblings, listening to her mother weep in the next room. She pressed her hands against her chest, trying to feel the wolf she knew lived inside her, trying to understand why it wouldn't wake up, wouldn't save her, wouldn't prove to everyone that she wasn't broken. "I'm not weak," she whispered to the darkness, to the wolf that slept too deeply to hear. "I'm not defective. There's nothing wrong with me." But in 3 days, Bebbanburg would take her to the Thing Stones and leave her to die, and all her protests wouldn't matter against 3 centuries of blood law and the cold mathematics of survival. Her 5th birthday would be her execution day, dressed up in tradition and religion so the clan could pretend their hands were clean. Dawn came too quickly, painting the sky in shades of blood and ash. Isolde woke Guinevere in silence, dressed her in the ritual white shift reserved for abandonments, and led her by the hand into the morning mist without speaking. There were no words left between them that hadn't already been said, cried, or screamed into the uncaring night. The path to the Thing Stones was well worn, used too often over the centuries. Guinevere's bare feet found the trail easily, even through the fog, following grooves carved by generations of mothers making this same terrible walk. Behind them, she could hear the clan gathering at the forest's edge, witnesses to ensure blood law was properly observed, that no mother tried to sneak her defective child back home under cover of darkness. The Thing Stones emerged from the mist, like ancient giants, towering monuments of weathered granite, carved with runes so old their meanings had been forgotten. They formed a perfect circle in the clearing, and within that circle, the grass grew too green, too lush, fed by what Guinevere was only now old enough to understand. Her foot came down on something that crunched. She looked down and saw a small bone, delicate as bird wings, half buried in the rich earth. A child's rib, she realized with horror. Then she saw another, and another, and there, a tiny skull still wearing scraps of rotted fabric that might once have been a shift like the one she wore now. "Oh gods," Guinevere whispered, understanding flooding through her like ice water. "How many?" "Mama, how many children died here?" "Too many," Isolde said, her voice hollow. "Every generation, there are always a few who don't shift in time. The blood law doesn't forgive. It never has." They reached the center of the circle, where a flat altar stone waited, stained dark with age and weather and things Guinevere didn't want to think about. Isolde pulled her daughter close one final time, and Guinevere could feel her mother's body shaking with suppressed sobs. "You have to understand," Isolde began, trying once more to explain the inexplicable. "The blood law is older than memory. It's kept us strong, kept us alive through wars and famines, and—" "You always have choice, Mama," Guinevere interrupted, her 5-year-old voice carrying a weight far beyond her years. "You're choosing them over me. Choosing the clan over your daughter. Just say it true, instead of hiding behind law and tradition." Isolde flinched as though struck. "If I don't leave you, Uhtred will exile all of us. Your brother and sister will starve. I'm trying to save 3 children by sacrificing one. That's not choice, that's impossible mathematics." "It's still choice," Guinevere said quietly. "You just chose which children matter more." Isolde pressed the small carved wolf into Guinevere's palm, her father's last gift, then turned and walked away before she could change her mind. Guinevere watched her mother disappear into the mist, watched the gathered clan witnesses disperse, watched until even the sound of footsteps faded to nothing. Then she was alone with the bones. 3 days passed in a blur of cold and hunger and creeping terror. Guinevere drank from streams muddy with autumn rains, tried to eat bitter berries that made her stomach cramp, huddled under bushes when night fell and predator sounds echoed through the darkness. She was so cold she couldn't feel her fingers, so hungry her stomach had stopped hurting and just felt empty, so tired that dying started to seem easier than surviving. On the 3rd night, something massive moved through the trees. Guinevere smelled it first. Wild wolf, pure predator, not the werewolf scent she knew from clan members. Her heart hammered as a shape emerged from shadows, huge and silver-grey, with amber eyes that caught the moonlight and held intelligence that seemed almost human. The wolf approached slowly, his great head lowered, scenting her. Guinevere tried to scramble backward, too weak to run, too exhausted to fight. This was it, then. The blood law would be satisfied. She'd die, and the clan could pretend nature had made the choice for them. But the wolf didn't attack. He circled her once, twice, studying her with those impossibly intelligent eyes. Then, with a rumble deep in his chest that might have been decision or recognition, he lay down beside her small, shivering body and pressed his warmth against her. Ancient magic recognized ancient magic, though Guinevere wouldn't understand that for years yet. The wild wolf alpha saw something in the abandoned werewolf child potential, perhaps, or simply worth, that her own kind had been too blind to recognize. Fenrir, alpha of the forest pack, adopted what the werewolves had thrown away, and Guinevere, who had been left to die for being defective, learned her first lesson in survival. Sometimes the monsters were more human than the humans ever were. The first winter after the banishment, Guinevere learned that weakness could be transformed into cunning. Fenrir's mate, a silver she-wolf with amber eyes that held more patience than any human understood, what the pack males did not. The girl child would never shift, so she must become something else entirely. Through snow that buried the forest in silence, the she-wolf taught her to read the language written in everything wolves took for granted. A bent twig wasn't just broken. It told direction, wait, how long ago. Scat revealed what prey ate, where they watered, whether sickness made them vulnerable. Wind didn't just carry scent. It predicted where deer would shelter, how sound would travel, which approach would leave her downwind and invisible. By her 8th spring, Guinevere had moved beyond mere survival. An elder wolf, grizzled and half-blind, recognized something the others missed. This human child had the capacity for the old magic, the rune work that werewolf clans had abandoned when they embraced the shift. He taught her to carve symbols into bark and bone, to read futures in the chaotic patterns of starling murmurations. to speak the clicking, growling tongue that forest spirits understood. Her human hands, useless for rending flesh, became instruments of power the pack wolves couldn't access. Summer of her 10th year marked her transformation from student to equal. She moved through the forest like smoke, coordinated hunts with sharp whistles and hand signals, brought down prey through strategy that made teeth and claws merely the final act of a longer play. The pack stopped seeing her deficiency. They saw only her effectiveness. Autumn arrived when she was 12, and with it, the last vestiges of the human child fell away like dead leaves. Words became difficult, unnecessary. The forest spoke in more honest languages. Clothes rotted off her body, replaced by mud and ash, and the ritual scars she carved herself. Each mark a kill, a season survived, a lesson learned. She howled more than she spoke, slept in dens instead of shelters, ate raw meat with bloody satisfaction. By 15, Guinevere had become something unprecedented. Her body was lean muscle and scars, her red hair a wild tangle of leaves and thorns, her green eyes burning with an intensity that made grown wolves look away. She moved naked through the territories without shame, covered in ceremonial mud, bones woven into her hair, runes carved into her skin. Her wolf had never come. The transformation every werewolf child experienced by 5 years old remained absent, that fundamental magic denied. But the Northumbrian forests had learned a different truth. The deadliest predator in these woods didn't need to shift. She was already something more terrible than wolf, or human alone. The wild pack understood what her birth clan never would worth wasn't determined by transformation. It was earned in blood and cunning, proven in survival, written in the respect of those who ran beside you. The deer's blood was still warm on Guinevere's hands when the world broke open. She'd been tracking the buck for 3 hours, moving through autumn undergrowth with the silence of something born to forests rather than merely adopted by them. The kill had been clean spear through the heart, a strike so precise the animal died before fear could flood its meat with bitterness. She was crouched beside the carcass, whispering thanks to its spirit in the old tongue, when reality itself seemed to fracture around her. The temperature plummeted. Her breath became visible in air that had been mild moments before. Every sound in the forest ceased, not the cautious silence of prey detecting predators, but absolute absence, as though the world held its breath. Silver light flooded through the canopy, moonlight that shouldn't exist in afternoon sun, and Guinevere felt something she hadn't experienced in 10 years. Fear. She rose into a crouch, spear raised, every instinct screaming at her to run, but there was nowhere to run from what materialized before her. The presence was so overwhelming that Guinevere's knees buckled, her body responding to divinity the way all mortal flesh must with submission. The moon goddess was terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. She appeared as a woman, but no human had ever possessed such presence. Her skin glowed with internal luminescence. Her eyes were the silver of full moons, and power radiated from her like heat from forge fires. Every creature within miles would be prostrate, overwhelmed by the weight of her divine attention. Guinevere of no clan. The goddess spoke, and her voice resonated in Guinevere's bones. The abandoned child who survived. Guinevere forced herself upright through sheer will, fighting her body's instinct to remain bowed. A growl built in her throat, the warning sound she'd learned from wolves, the sound that meant time's dangerous, approach with caution, asterisk. 10 years in the wild had taught her that beautiful things were often the most deadly, and she'd learned to trust nothing that claimed power over her. I've watched you these 10 years, the goddess continued, seeming amused, rather than offended, by Guinevere's defiance. Watched you adapt when you should have died. Watched you prove their blood law wrong. Watched you become something your birth clan never imagined possible. Then you watched them abandon a 5-year-old in winter. Guinevere managed, her voice rough from disuse, words feeling foreign on her tongue. "You're aligned with clans who murder children for weakness. I'm not aligned with them." The goddess's expression hardened, moonlight eyes flashing with something ancient and wrathful. "I'm here to claim you as my champion. You're Wolf, Guinevere, an ancient bloodline seer warriors who walked between worlds, who commanded magic the modern clans have forgotten. Your wolf waited 15 years, because Volva power requires suffering first. You couldn't access your true form without understanding survival, loss, and the old magic that flows beneath everything." Guinevere's mind reeled. The Volva, she'd heard fragments in the Elder Wolf's teachings, old stories about warrior seers who'd been living weapons and divine conduits. "Your abandonment wasn't punishment," the goddess said softly. "It was awakening. Everything you've endured, everything you've learned, everything you've become, it prepared you for what you truly are." The silver light intensified until Guinevere had to shield her eyes. "I offer you a deal," the goddess declared. 8 years training in my shadow realm, it will pass as only days in mortal time. Master your Volva magic, claim your wolf form, become the weapon you were born to be. Then return and destroy the blood law that condemned you. Save every child who comes after." Guinevere's heart hammered against her ribs. 8 years. 8 more years of training, but this time with purpose beyond survival. This time with power enough to ensure no 5-year-old would ever die alone in winter forests again. She thought of Uhtred's face as he'd walked away, of her mother's tears that changed nothing, of every werewolf child who'd been measured and found wanting by laws older than memory. "Make me strong enough to end what Uhtred started," Guinevere said, her voice carrying the growl of wolves and the fury of something that had clawed its way back from death. "Make me powerful enough to save the next abandoned child." The moon goddess smiled, and it was terrible and beautiful. Done. The shadow realm existed outside mortal time, a place where moonlight fell sideways and gravity obeyed different laws. For 8 years that would pass as mere days in the world she'd left behind. Guinevere learned what it meant to be Volva. The first year stripped away any romantic notions about seer magic. The goddess taught her to read the word, the intricate web of fate that connected all living things. And what Guinevere saw in those threads broke something fundamental inside her. She learned to commune with spirits, and the dead who answered her call were children, hundreds of them. Abandoned werewolf children whose wolves never came, who died alone in forests and mountains and winter wastes across 3 centuries. They showed her their names, all 347 of them. Guinevere carved each name into her memory like a blood oath. Let their stories fuel the rage that would sustain her through what came next. The dead children didn't want vengeance, they wanted to ensure no one else joined their ranks. That purpose became the foundation of everything. The second year brought mastery of runes beyond anything the old wolf had taught. Battle runes that could wound from across a battlefield. Invisible strikes that bypassed armor and found soft flesh beneath. Protection runes so powerful they could turn even divine weapons aside. Summoning runes that called wild animals as though they were extensions of her will, wolves and ravens and bears answering her carved symbols like soldiers to a general's command. Year 3 tested her limits. Blood magic was controversial even among the Volva of old. Power purchased with pain. Spells fueled by sacrifice. But the goddess was unflinching. Your enemies won't hesitate to use every advantage. You can't afford squeamishness about your own blood. Guinevere learned to open her veins with ritual precision, to forge unbreakable bonds, to compel truth through blood oaths that made lying physically impossible. Each spell left scars, her body becoming a map of power earned through suffering. The 4th year transformed her into a weapon. The goddess trained her with every tool of war, sword and axe, spear and sea axe. the long knife that could gut an enemy or skin a deer with equal efficiency. But more than technique, she learned to fight like the berserkers of old, channeling absolute fury without losing the strategic mind that made her dangerous. Rage without purpose was just violence. Rage with calculation was devastation. Year 5 brought what she'd waited 2 decades to experience. The shift, when it finally came, was nothing like the smooth transformations she'd watched clan wolves perform. It was agony and ecstasy, her body tearing itself apart and remaking itself into something unprecedented. The vulva wolf was massive, easily twice the size of normal werewolves, with silver-white fur marked by glowing runes that pulsed with each heartbeat. Her eyes retained their green but gained something more, a luminescence that saw through lies and illusions, that perceived truth no matter how carefully hidden. The revelation she treasured most: she could shift partially, claws while keeping human hands' dexterity, fangs while maintaining human speech, enhanced senses while preserving human strategic thinking. The vulva form didn't replace her humanity, it enhanced it, made her more rather than different. The final 3 years focused on something Guinevere hadn't anticipated: leadership. Destroying the blood law isn't enough, the goddess explained, moonlight eyes intense with purpose. You must build something better in its place. Unite the survivors, the abandoned ones who lived, the wolves who question the old ways. Create a new clan culture built on chosen bonds rather than blood purity. Guinevere learned diplomacy and warfare, inspiration and intimidation, how to forge alliances and when to break them. She studied the political structures of every werewolf clan in Britain, identified the fault lines in their power, learned which alphas might be swayed and which would need to be eliminated. The goddess was uncompromising. You'll face enemies who've held power for centuries. You need to be smarter, stronger, and more ruthless than all of them combined. On the final day of the 8th year, the goddess performed the climactic ceremony. Guinevere knelt in a circle of moonfire, while divine power flooded through her like lightning through water. The rune mark blazed into existence on her forehead, a wolf's head with a seer's third eye, surrounded by broken chains. The mark glowed silver against her skin, impossible to hide, announcing to anyone who saw it exactly what she was: Vulva Champion, the moon goddess's chosen weapon. Return to the mortal realm, the goddess commanded, her voice resonating with power that made the shadow realm tremble. Find Uhtred Bloodfang. Make him understand what he created when he abandoned you. Then tear down every law, every tradition, every excuse they've used to justify murdering children. Guinevere rose, no longer the feral girl who'd entered this place. She was something forged in divine fire, tempered by suffering, sharpened by purpose. The rune on her forehead pulsed with silver light as she smiled, an expression that held no humor, only promise. For the 347, she said softly. The goddess nodded. For the 347, and all who come after. Reality fractured, and Guinevere stepped back into a world that would learn to fear the name it had tried to erase. Guinevere materialized at the Thing Stone Circle exactly 3 days after her abandonment. Though for her, 18 years had passed in training and transformation. The ancient stone stood silent witness as she stepped from shadow into morning light, no longer a terrified 5-year-old, but a woman of 23 who commanded power that made the air itself tremble. Fenrir's wild pack emerged from the forest behind her, 17 wolves who'd raised her and now followed her as their chosen alpha. They formed a protective semicircle as Guinevere began walking toward Bebbanburg fortress, her bare feet silent on frost-hardened ground, her body wrapped in simple leather and fur that did nothing to conceal the ritual scars covering her skin. Dawn was breaking over the North Sea as clan scouts spotted her approach. The alarm horn's call shattered the morning stillness, 3 sharp blasts that meant unknown threat approaching. Warriors poured from the longhouses, weapons drawn, forming defensive lines as Jarl Uhtred Bloodfang strode through their ranks to face whatever dared approach his stronghold with a wolf pack at its back. He didn't recognize her at first. How could he? The woman walking toward him was lean muscle and scars, wild red hair cascading past her waist, green eyes burning with intensity that made his warriors shift uncomfortably. She moved like violence contained, each step deliberate, power radiating from her in waves that made the horses in nearby paddocks scream and bolt. Then their eyes met, and Uhtred's face went pale. "The Isolde girl," he breathed, the words carrying in the sudden silence. "Impossible. You should be bones in the forest. I became something better than your blood law allows," Guinevere said, and her voice was rough from years of howling more than speaking, but each word carried absolute clarity. "I'm Volva Champion. The moon goddess claimed me, trained me, and sent me back to end the child murder you disguise as clan purity." Uhtred's hand went to his sword. The Volva bloodline died out centuries. She dropped her suppression. The mark blazed to life on her forehead, wolfhead with seer's third eye, surrounded by broken chains, glowing with silver fire that painted the assembled warriors in moonlight. Wild magic rolled off her in waves that crashed against every werewolf present like physical force. Alphas dropped to their knees. Warriors' hands fell away from weapons as their wolves howled inside them, recognizing divine authority that superseded every mortal hierarchy. Uhtred remained standing through sheer willpower, but Guinevere could see him shaking with the effort. "You abandoned weakness," she said softly, walking forward as the crowd parted before her like water. "Let me show you what that weakness became." She shifted. The transformation was nothing like the smooth changes clan wolves performed. Her body exploded into the Volva wolf form, massive, easily twice the size of any werewolf Uhtred had ever seen, with silver-white fur marked by glowing runes that pulsed with divine power. Her eyes remained green but luminescent, burning with the ability to see through every lie, every justification, every excuse. "This is what you abandoned," Guinevere's voice rumbled from the wolf's throat, still capable of human speech in a way that violated every natural law. "This is what you called weak. This is power your blood law tried to eliminate before it could awaken." She raised one massive paw, claws carving runes into the frozen earth with casual precision. The symbols blazed to life, and reality itself seemed to crack open around them. The spirits came. 347 children materialized in the morning light, translucent, heartbreaking, their eyes holding the terror of their final moments. They ranged in age from 4 to 12, every child abandoned by blood law across 3 centuries. The assembled clan saw them, forced to witness through Guinevere's seer magic, unable to look away, as the dead children showed them everything. The cold, the hunger, the wolves that weren't family, that saw them only as prey, the slow hypothermia, the desperate final hours, the way each child called for parents who never came, the last thoughts that echoed through the spirit realm. Asterisk, why don't they love me? What did I do wrong? Please come back. I'll be good. I promise I'll shift. Please, don't leave me alone. Asterisk. Warriors wept openly. Mothers collapsed, seeing their own children's faces in the dead. Even hardened alphas turned away, unable to bear witness to what their traditions had purchased. Uhtred Bloodfang stood frozen, staring at a small girl no older than 6, her throat torn out by wolves, her eyes still holding the confusion of betrayal. "This is the cost of your blood law," Guinevere said, her massive wolf form radiating power that made the fortress walls tremble. 347 children across 3 centuries, murdered by the people who should have protected them. condemned for circumstances beyond their control. The spirits faded slowly, their message delivered, leaving only silence and shame. Guinevere shifted back to human form, standing naked and unashamed before the assembled clan, the vulva mark still blazing on her forehead. "The blood law ends today," she declared, "or I end you." Guinevere stood before the assembled clan and invoked the authority granted by her divine mark. "By right of champion, I dissolve the blood law. No child will be abandoned again. No deadline will determine worth. The murders end today." Uhtred's voice cracked like a whip across the stunned silence. "You can't destroy 3 centuries of tradition with a word. Blood law keeps us strong, pure, worthy of Odin's favor. Weak wolves endanger the entire pack. One defective pup compromises our survival." "Late shifters aren't weak. They're different," Guinevere countered, her green eyes blazing. "And I'll prove it." She raised one hand, carving a summoning rune in the air with clawed fingers. Reality rippled, and a figure stepped through a man massive, even by werewolf standards, his body a map of scars that told stories of survival against impossible odds. His eyes held the same feral intelligence as Guinevere's, the mark of someone who'd clawed their way back from death. "This is Ragnar," Guinevere announced. "Abandoned at age 6 for defective bloodline. Left to die because his wolf came late. He survived through strength you can't imagine. Became the finest warrior I've trained in 8 years. Your blood law tried to murder your best fighter." Ragnar shifted smoothly into wolf form, huge, battle-scarred, radiating controlled violence that made Uhtred's elite guard step backward involuntarily. "Lies," Uhtred spat. "Tricks and divine manipulation. The boy would have died properly if left alone. You interfered with natural selection. Then you refuse reform?" Guinevere's voice dropped to something dangerous. "I refuse destruction disguised as progress." The clan fractured like ice under pressure. Warriors looked at each other, decades of certainty suddenly uncertain. Some moved immediately to stand behind Uhtred blood law loyalists who saw tradition as sacred. Others hesitated, doubt written across their faces as they remembered the spirit's testimony. The 347 murdered children, whose deaths suddenly felt less like necessity and more like atrocity. Brida was the first to cross the line. The fierce shield-maiden warrior strode through the crowd with her hand on her axe, positioning herself beside Guinevere without hesitation. "I've questioned blood law for years," she declared, her voice carrying across the assembly. "Watched strong pups abandoned for arbitrary deadlines. Watched parents grieve children who deserved to live. This ends now." Leofric followed a gruff veteran covered in scars from 50 years of warfare. "I've been secretly saving abandoned pups for decades," he admitted, shame and defiance mixing in his weathered face. "Hidden them with human families, given them chances to survive. Couldn't stop the system alone, but I can stand with someone who will." Others joined, not enough to prevent war, but enough to make it civil rather than execution. For 3 days, Bebbanburg tore itself apart. Shield walls crashed together in fields that had known peace for generations. Battle runes blazed across the landscape, Guinevere's magic against traditional clan sorcery. Wild wolves coordinated with reformed clan warriors in tactics that bewildered bloodlaw defenders. Ragnar fought like 3 men, proving with every kill that late shifting meant nothing about ultimate capability. On the 3rd day, as both sides bled and exhausted, Guinevere issued formal challenge. "Single combat. Uhtred Bloodfang and me. Winner determines Bebbanburg's future. Your warriors have died for your pride. Face me yourself." Honor demanded he accept. They met in the center of the battlefield, both armies watching from their respective lines. Uhtred in full armor, sword and shield. Guinevere in leather and fur, twin CXs gleaming. Before the first blow, She carved blood oath runes into the frozen ground between them. "Fight me, Jarl, but the magic will compel truth." Why was blood law really created? Uhtred's face went pale, recognizing the trap. Blood oath magic couldn't be resisted. It would drag truth from his soul whether he willed it or not. "You fight dishonorably." "I fight to save children. Honor is negotiable." They clashed. Uhtred was skilled, powerful, decades of experience in every strike. But Guinevere had trained with a goddess for 8 years, mastered combat that made mortal technique look clumsy. She flowed around his attacks like water, her blades finding gaps in his armor with surgical precision. As his blood fed the runes carved in earth, the magic activated. Words tore from Uhtred's throat against his will, each syllable forced out by divine compulsion. Blood law was never about strength, he gasped, dropping to one knee as Guinevere's blade opened his shoulder. It was about control, about eliminating bloodlines I feared could challenge mine. The Volva, the Berserker lines, the Seer families, all produced late shifters, all possessed power beyond normal wolves. I murdered 300 children across 3 centuries to secure my dynasty's dominance. The confession hung in the air like poison. Both armies heard it, saw their jarl's lips form the words that condemned him. Uhtred roared and attacked with the fury of desperation, abandoning defense for killing strikes. Guinevere met him head-on, their blades locked, her green eyes boring into his. "For the 347, she whispered. Her CX found his heart. Uhtred Bloodfang collapsed, blood spreading across ground that drank it like judgment. His eyes remained open, shocked even in death, that the weak child he'd abandoned had become the weapon that ended him. Guinevere stood over his body, raised her blade to both armies, and howled a sound that carried the voices of 347 murdered children finally avenged. The blood law shattered with its architect's final breath. Guinevere stood before the assembled jarls 3 weeks after Uhtred's death. Representatives from every major clan in Northumbria gathered in Bebbanburg's great hall. The Volva mark blazed silver on her forehead as she presented evidence that would reshape their world. 3 centuries of systematic child murder, she began, her voice carrying to the rafest corners. Bebbanburg alone killed 347 children. Multiply that across your territories. Jorvik abandoned 412. Lindisfarne killed 298. Bamburgh murdered 356. Thousands of children condemned for circumstances beyond their control, executed by the people sworn to protect them. She carved runes in the air, and the spirits appeared again, not just Bebbanburg's dead, but children from every clan present, the hall filled with translucent figures whose eyes held centuries of betrayal. Some jarls looked away, others wept. None could deny what materialized before them. The moon goddess herself testified. Guinevere continued, channeling divine presence that made every wolf in the hall submit involuntarily. Odin never mandated blood law. That lie was perpetuated by jarls who feared bloodlines they couldn't control. Late shifters often become seers, berserkers, exceptional strategists, power that threatened established hierarchies. You murdered your greatest potential to maintain comfortable mediocrity. She let that sink in before presenting the practical evidence. I analyzed 3 centuries of clan records. Territories practicing blood law showed no prosperity advantage over clans that protected late shifters. No increased survival rates, no superior warriors. Blood law created generational trauma without providing a single measurable benefit. You sacrificed children for superstition, not strategy. Murmurs rippled through the assembly agreement, denial, uncertainty mixing in the charged air. I propose new clan law, Guinevere declared, her voice brooking no argument. Late shifters protected until age 12, with comprehensive support systems. Any Jarl attempting abandonment faces permanent exile. Strength measured by contribution to clan welfare, not shift timing. A Volva council established to mediate disputes and ensure compliance. Jarl Bjorn of Jorvik stood, his weathered face skeptical. Pretty words from a divine champion, but you ask us to overturn centuries of tradition based on your singular experience. Then let me demonstrate, Guinevere replied. She summoned Ragnar, who entered leading a squad of warriors in perfect formation. He demonstrated tactics that made the assembled Jarls lean forward with interest-coordinated strikes, adaptive strategy, the kind of battlefield intelligence that won wars. Late shifter at 13, Guinevere announced. Now the finest tactical mind in Northumbria. Breda entered next, with a group of young girls, some who'd shifted early, others still waiting. She demonstrated combat techniques that made gender and shift timing irrelevant, pure skill, determination, the fighting spirit that couldn't be measured by arbitrary deadlines. I teach that worth comes from heart, not transformation schedule, Breda said simply. Finally, Leofric brought forward the pups he'd secretly rescued over decades, now grown into blacksmiths, healers, scouts, diplomats, valuable clan members who would have been corpses in forests if blood law had gone unchallenged. These are the people your traditions tried to eliminate, he said quietly. Look at what you almost lost. The vote took hours of heated debate, but the evidence was undeniable. Cultural transformation passed 38-7, blood law becoming illegal across Northumbria. The dissenting Jarls were given 1 year to comply or face exile themselves. As the assembly dispersed, Guinevere stood alone in the great hall, feeling the weight of 347 spirits finally at peace. She'd kept her promise to the moon goddess, to the dead children, to herself. The abandoned had become the architect of salvation. Guinevere established Ravenstone at the Thingstone Circle, transforming the place where Uhtred had condemned her into a sanctuary fortress. The ancient stones that had witnessed her abandonment now marked the boundaries of a haven where no child would ever be left behind again. They came by hundreds, survivors with scars that told stories of impossible endurance, late shifters whose clans had been preparing abandonment rituals when news of the new clan law arrived. Even early shifters who'd watched blood law claim siblings and couldn't stomach the tradition any longer. Each arrival brought fresh proof that what Guinevere had suffered wasn't isolated tragedy but systematic atrocity. Ragnar became her shield brother and co-leader, the partnership forming through shared purpose rather than hierarchy. They understood each other in ways no one else could. Both carried the particular damage that came from being abandoned by people who should have died protecting them. Both had learned that survival required becoming harder than the circumstances trying to break you. Their relationship developed slowly, carefully. Two feral creatures circling each other with equal parts attraction and wariness. The mate bond hummed between them from the first day, that pull werewolves called fate, but neither trusted it. Fate had condemned them once. Why should they surrender to its whims again? Months passed in building Ravenstone. They worked side by side, Guinevere planning defenses and establishing governance, Ragnar training warriors and coordinating construction. They fought back to back when blood law loyalists attacked, their movements synchronized without conscious thought. They sat together in the great hall late at night, discussing strategy and gradually sharing the stories they'd never told anyone else. The mate bond activated fully on a winter morning 6 months after Ravenstone's founding. Guinevere woke to find it blazing between them like a physical cord, undeniable and demanding. But instead of surrendering to biological imperative, they sat across from each other in the dawn light and talked. I won't complete this bond because fate says I should, Guinevere said quietly. I've spent my life defying what others claimed was inevitable. Then we choose it, Ragnar replied, his scarred hands reaching for hers. Not because the goddess decreed it, not because our wolves demand it. Because we've earned trust in each other, built partnership worth making permanent. Because I choose you, Guinevere, the woman who became a weapon, the champion who saved me. She kissed him then, fierce and claiming, and the bond sealed with their conscious acceptance rather than helpless submission. It felt like reclaiming agency, transforming even divine gifts into choices freely made. Bryda became Ravenstone's shield maiden commander, establishing training programs that valued strategy over brute force. She taught young women that fighting spirit couldn't be measured by shift timing, that the fiercest warriors often came from those who'd survived impossible odds. Her students became legendary, tactically brilliant, absolutely fearless, proof that strength took countless forms. Leofric trained scouts in rescue operations, coordinating networks across Northumbria to identify clans still attempting secret abandonments. His teams moved like ghosts, extracting children before death sentences could be carried out, bringing them to Ravenstone, where second chances weren't just promised, but guaranteed. In 5 years, they saved 127 pups who would have died under the old laws. Isolde arrived on a spring morning, thin and haunted, seeking the daughter she'd failed to protect 18 years earlier. Guinevere met her at Ravenstone's gates, seeing the woman who'd wept but walked away, who'd chosen her mate over her child. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Guinevere said, the words carefully honest. "You let him take me. You stood there and did nothing." "I know." Isolde's voice broke. "I've lived with that choice every day since. I came to beg forgiveness I don't deserve." "I won't give you forgiveness," Guinevere replied. "Not yet, maybe never, but I'll offer something harder: redemption. Work here. Save the children you couldn't save before. Prove through action that you've changed. Earn back what you lost." Isolde accepted, taking position in Ravenstone's healing halls. She worked with traumatized arrivals, used her own guilt as bridge to understand their pain, became someone who could say, "I failed my child, but I won't fail yours," and mean it with every fiber of her being. The relationship between mother and daughter remained fraught, complicated, but it existed, a fragile thing growing stronger through shared purpose. 5 years passed. Ravenstone grew from sanctuary into symbol, a fortress community proving that the abandoned didn't just survive, they thrived, led, built systems better than those that had condemned them. Late shifters became warriors, healers, leaders, diplomats. The myth of weakness shattered against the reality of their accomplishments. Guinevere stood atop Ravenstone's walls one evening, Ragnar beside her, watching the sun set over territories she'd transformed. The vulva mark on her forehead glowed softly in the twilight, divine reminder of the power that came from refusing to die when the world demanded it. "For the 347, she whispered to the wind. And in the growing darkness, 347 spirits finally rested, knowing their deaths had purchased a future where no child would join them.